Shiki was nothing more than an ordinary troublemaker who had been kicked out of school. But when a mysterious man suddenly attacks him and murders his father, he discovers that demon blood runs through his body and decides to master his abilities to seek revenge. Long ago, a race of demons known as the Oni existed in Japan, destroying everything and slaughtering humans whenever they wished. Nobody dared to challenge them. But eventually, a courageous man named Mamo appeared as humanity's protector. He launched an assault on the Oni stronghold, killing thousands of them. Yet this was only the start of a long, drawn-out war between Mamo and the Oni, a conflict that still continues into the present era. Unaware of how this old legend is tied to his own fate, a teenager named Shiki is cleaning his firearm collection while chatting on the phone with a friend. He laughs about recently being expelled from school after a fight and says he doesn't even care since he was tired of looking at his classmates' ugly faces every day. At that moment, his adoptive father, Tsuyoshi, appears and smacks him on the head, demanding an explanation for why he got kicked out. Shiki tells him to mind his own business, and Tsuyoshi moves in to hit him again for being such an ungrateful brat. But this time, Shiki dodges. Tsuyoshi then asks what's with all the guns since they run a wine shop, not a weapon store. Shiki mocks him, saying the wine business is barely staying alive because everyone knows he's losing customers. Tsuyoshi fires back, making fun of him for acting so superior despite being expelled. And Shiki takes that insult seriously. He says he'll never become a loser like Tsuyoshi and is honestly relieved they're not related by blood. That comment hurts the old man, but he heads downstairs after receiving a business call. Tsuyoshi leaves for a delivery, and Shiki sighs, wishing some wealthy man had adopted him instead. He then tries to practice his aim, but an explosion outside the house startles him. He runs out to see what's going on, but a thick fog blocks his vision. Suddenly, a blast of strange black mist shoots out from the fog, knocking Shiki backwards in shock. The mist pursues him, grabs his leg, and drags him outside before dropping him onto the street. As Shiki stands up, confused about what the hell is happening, a terrifying old man dressed in white appears ready to strike. But the next second, Tsuyoshi arrives and crashes his car into the attacker, telling Shiki to get inside. He speeds off as fast as possible, saying their only chance is to leave the country right now. But Shiki still hasn't grasped what just happened. He asks how his dad could just kill someone with a car, but Tsuyoshi tells him the guy isn't dead yet and they need to get far away from him. Distressed, he tells Shiki to listen carefully because they don't have much time. Tsuyoshi explains that Shiki is a descendant of the Oni and the man who attacked him is a descendant of Mamotero. Shiki tells him to stop joking because it's not the right time, but Tsuyoshi insists he's telling the truth. Just then, a blade formed from black mist pierces the car roof and Tsuyoshi barely avoids it. He realizes their pursuer has caught up, and suddenly every window is coated with black mist, leaving them completely blind. Tsuyoshi stops the car near an abandoned warehouse and jumps out, telling Shiki they have to hide immediately. At that moment, the car explodes, and when Tsuyoshi turns back, he sees that Shiki has vanished. Fortunately, he notices a trail of black mist moving into the warehouse and realizes his son was dragged inside. Within the warehouse, Shiki finds himself trapped in a massive web made from black mist, with a frightening man named Samadare standing before him. Samadare tells Shiki that the Oni blood inside him makes him nothing more than a pest, and exterminating such pests is the duty of the Mamotero Agency. Shiki is still stunned that Samadare survived being hit by a car. But then, Tsuyoshi arrives, telling him that the old story of Mamo is actually true. He explains that for thousands of years, Mamo and the Oni have waged war through their descendants who inherited their bloodlines. Eventually, the Mamotero descendants united and created the Mamotero Agency, gaining the upper hand and forcing the Oni to hide among humans in order to survive. Shiki still cannot wrap his head around the situation, but Tsuyoshi tells him to let his father take care of it. Samadare suddenly forms two swords made of black mist, and in response, Tsuyoshi activates the same power to fight him. The two rush toward each other, clashing blades and unleashing a powerful shockwave. Tsuyoshi manages to push Samadare back, but Samadare calls him weaker than he used to be. He explains that the black mist is a special ability unique to Mamo's descendants, and Tsuyoshi was once his superior in the Mamotero Agency. Shiki is stunned to learn that his father is a descendant of Mamotero. But Tsuyoshi says he has long forgotten that past. Samadare asks whether he has also forgotten how dangerous the Oni are. He declares that for the crime of harboring an Oni, Tsuyoshi will be executed as well. Tsuyoshi responds by striking first, but he and Samadare are evenly matched. Shiki can only watch their insane battle in disbelief while Samadare questions why Tsuyoshi is protecting a monster that exists only for destruction. Tsuyoshi tells him to shut up and attempts to land a serious blow, but Samadare is far faster than he anticipated. He effortlessly dodges, then unleashes a rapid-fire combo that severely injures Tsuyoshi and knocks him unconscious. Shiki is devastated watching his father bleed out and curses Samadare, vowing to kill him. But Samadare says he will be joining his father in the afterlife soon. That moment, Tsuyoshi grabs his leg, and Samadare asks why he is going so far to defend an Oni. He replies that he doesn't need a reason to protect his son. He says Shiki hasn't harmed anyone, and killing him just because he has Oni blood is wrong. Samadare simply forms another black mist sword to finish him off. And the fury boiling inside Shiki finally bursts through its limit. His eyes turn red as he swears to kill the bastard who is trying to hurt his dad, and his demonic powers awaken. Blood pours from every pore on his face, and demonic horns emerge from his head. Shiki screams that he will kill Samadare. When the man turns to look at him, he sees Shiki is no longer bound by the web. In the next instant, multiple guns formed from blood appear beside Shiki's face. But Samadare manages to block the shots with his quick reflexes. However, Shiki has already moved elsewhere. As Samadare wonders where he went, he notices blood dripping from the ceiling, where Shiki hangs upside down like some deranged Batman. Seeing his blood-covered form, Samadare realizes Shiki has awakened and can now fight by manipulating his blood. But that's not even the most terrifying part of battling an Oni. Suddenly, Shiki hurls himself at him, forcing him backward with powerful strikes. Samadare quickly reverses the situation, slicing Shiki's arm off, but Shiki leaps back and regenerates the limb instantly. He then lets out a crazed scream, and Samadare begins sweating, realizing this battle won't be simple. Shiki manifests his power into numerous blood-crafted guns, and Samadare must use every bit of his strength and speed to block the bullets. Then Shiki fires an actual missile at him. Relying on pure instinct, Samadare narrowly dodges it, and the rocket explodes behind him. The old man is forced to flee from Shiki's relentless assault, but he throws his sword at him, hoping to end things quickly. But that barely slows Shiki down, as he dashes forward and kicks him away. Samadare is far too exhausted and wounded to move fast enough, and Shiki stomps on his face before unloading what amounts to an entire military battalion's worth of ammunition into him. However, Samadare still manages to escape with his life even though he is severely wounded. He swears at Shiki, but then Shiki suddenly collapses and the blood-formed guns crumble apart. His Oni transformation disappears. And as he looks down at his blood-covered hands, Shiki completely loses it, questioning what the hell just occurred. Samadare recognizes this as a common reaction among those who awaken their Oni powers for the first time. With the little strength he has left, he summons another black mist sword, deciding to end his mission immediately. However, right before he can stab Shiki, Tsuyoshi leaps between them, sacrificing himself to protect his son. Samadare demands to know how he could gamble his own life for the boy even after witnessing the monster he turned into. Tsuyoshi simply remembers how Shiki used to be an adorable little kid and tells his old companion that being a joyful father wasn't such a bad thing, even if it only lasted briefly. At that moment, a few civilians arrive after hearing the explosion, calling the fire department, and Samadare decides to withdraw for now. He dissolves into black mist and disappears, leaving the wounded Tsuyoshi and the bewildered Shiki behind. Shiki panics and says he will call an ambulance, but his father tells him to stop because he knows this is the end. He only wants to speak with his son one last time before dying. Tsuyoshi explains that he could never reveal his true ancestry to him because doing so would mean admitting that people were out there trying to kill him. But now all he can do is ask Shiki to grow strong enough to defeat both Mamotero and Oni so he can live freely and happily. However, Shiki yells at him to shut up because he isn't finished with him yet. He starts carrying him outside, insisting they will talk again once he recovers. And Tsuyoshi gives him one final smile before taking his last breath. As the old man collapses to the ground, Shiki loses his sanity. He tries shaking him awake at first and then breaks down crying uncontrollably. Shortly after that, a man on roller skates appears. And when Shiki turns to face him, the man knocks him out with a single tap to the head before taking him away to a place where only people like him can grow stronger. While unconscious, Shiki dreams about the joyful times when he played in the park under his father's watchful gaze. But then the dream abruptly twists into darkness, showing Suwashur dying by Samoder's hand. Shiki wakes up with a violent jolt as he finds himself staring into Samoder's bloodshot eyes. But when he looks around, he realizes he is gagged and tied to a chair inside a large, empty hall. Behind him, the skater who kidnapped him is doing one-arm handstand push-ups using his umbrella, and he stands upright the moment he notices Shiki regain consciousness. The edgy man introduces himself as Nato, another Oni, and immediately reveals his horns. Shiki is far too overwhelmed to follow anything, and he can't even focus on Nato, who refuses to tell him where they currently are. He informs Shiki that his father's body is being safely stored somewhere else, and he brought Shiki here for retrieval and assessment. Nato then abruptly skates toward the whiteboard in the corner and pulls it closer, boasting about how fast and efficient roller skates are compared to walking. Next, he begins explaining the Mamotero Agency to Shiki, explaining that he has already encountered someone capable of controlling the black mist and using it as a weapon. The Mamotero Agency hunts Oni. And in response, the Oni established their own agency to fight back. Nato says his role is to locate newly awakened Oni like Shiki and bring them to a secure place where he can judge whether they are suitable to join the Oni agency. After this brief introduction, he rolls the whiteboard back and removes Shiki's gag so he can begin the interview. As soon as the gag comes off, Shiki starts screaming at him to release him. He also curses Nato and threatens to kill him if he did anything to his dad's body, and Nato instantly deducts a point from his score, which was already at 0. He calls Shiki A for failing to grasp what safely stored means even though he mentioned it minutes ago. Shiki becomes furious and says there's no way he can trust a shady edgelord like him. And Nato wasn't expecting anything different from him. He decides to subtract even more points from Shiki's score every time he curses or demands to be freed, telling him to cooperate if he wants to pass the evaluation. Shiki doesn't give a about the evaluation, but he wants to get out quickly, so he tries to restrain his anger. Unfortunately, he can't even manage that, and Nato tells him to quit giving him that creepy stare. Shiki snaps upon hearing this, and Nato chooses to assess him using an unconventional method since normal approaches don't work with lunatics. He removes his tie, and before Shiki can process anything, Nato uses it to strangle him with full force. Shiki panics as his breath fades, and Nato says a creature's real nature appears when death is close, and that is exactly what he wants to observe. Shiki fights back with everything he has. But he cannot break free from the chokehold even after bleeding from every opening in his face. He soon passes out, and Nato is disappointed. But the blood Shiki spilled activates due to its power. It morphs into sharp spikes and attacks Nato, who dodges with little trouble. Suddenly, a blood-constructed Gatling gun appears aimed at Nato's head, and behind it Shiki stands in his berserker mode. He opens fire at Nato and steps back once he is satisfied. But none of his shots land, as the edgelord protected himself by coating his umbrella with his blood. He deducts another 100 points from Shiki because he doesn't even know how to utilize his Oni blood and then chooses to demonstrate how it's truly done, even though Shiki won't remember anything once the berserker state ends. Shiki suddenly charges at him, but Nato is prepared for every move. And a few minutes later, Shiki regains consciousness, lying defeated on the floor. He cannot process what just occurred. But then he sees his red-covered hands and panics, realizing he lost control again. Nato calmly sits on top of him, explaining that it's normal for his memory to be blank because when an Oni goes berserk, they completely lose their sanity. Around them, the hall is a complete disaster because of their fight. And Shiki tells Nato to quit lecturing him when he himself uses his blood as a weapon. Nato instantly makes his blood umbrella vanish, telling Shiki he never went berserk because he actually knows how to control his abilities. He then states that there is nothing left to discuss because Shiki is officially disqualified from joining the Oni agency. Shiki still has no idea what is going on. But if there is one thing he is certain of, it's that Nato is unbelievably strong. He decides to swallow his pride and begs Nato to take him in as his subordinate because he wants to grow stronger and avenge his father. Nato immediately refuses, telling Shiki that someone like him, who doesn't use his brain in combat, is always the first to die in a real fight. He calls him a useless disgrace who can neither control his mind nor his power, and Shiki uses every bit of his strength to restrain his rage. Nato then declares that the time has come for him to dispose of Shiki, stating that a berserk Oni is a danger to everyone, and he uses his special ring to slice his thumb, letting a small stream of blood drip out which he turns into an umbrella. Shiki suddenly gets an idea about how to make him reconsider, so he runs outside of Nato's range before sprinting back toward him while dragging his fist on the ground until it bleeds. Nato quickly reshapes his umbrella into a spiked shield to protect himself from any melee attack and calculates all possible moves Shiki might attempt. Shiki jumps at the last moment, one of the actions Nato predicted, but then he surprises him by using the spikes as a springboard to leap aside and aim a bloody gun at his face. Shiki concentrates all his focus into the weapon and fires a powerful shot, the recoil launching him backward. He can't believe he actually managed to hit Nato, but once again he failed, as Nato blocks the blood bullet with a single finger and shatters it, refusing to give Shiki any credit because he partially entered berserk mode just to attack him. As Shiki begins losing his mind again, Nato decides to finish him off with his special move, placing himself inside a protective cage and summoning archers formed from his blood, ready to fire at his orders. However, when he notices Shiki pushing back against his berserker instincts and regaining control over his power, he cancels the move. Shiki is proud for stabilizing his power, but then he collapses from overexertion. Nato can't believe Shiki not only controlled his ability but also suppressed berserker mode, something not everyone can do, and he demands to know how he accomplished it. Shiki smugly tells him to accept him as an underling if he wants the answer. Nato says he'll consider it, which Shiki interprets as a yes. He explains that when Nato talked about controlling his blood, he didn't understand at first, but when he saw him slice his thumb and use the blood to form a weapon, he got an idea. Since they were both Oni, he thought he could just imitate him, and surprisingly it worked. Even though he didn't understand the finer details, he simply let his arm bleed while mentally yelling at it to shape a weapon. Shiki is still excited that his gamble succeeded and asks Nato what he thinks about it, but Nato calls it complete nonsense because that's not how things work. In his experience, emotional and reckless teens like Shiki struggle to control their blood, while calm and rational people like him have the best chance of using their power correctly. He believes Shiki doesn't listen to reason and instead lets his berserker impulses guide him, using raw instinct to force his power into obeying him. He considers it a rough method but one that can generate explosive strength. As he wonders how to deal with this unusual case, Shiki suddenly says he needs power to avenge his father and kill the man who murdered him, insisting that if Nato takes him as an underling and teaches him everything, he will become useful. Nato refuses to consider it and morphs his umbrella into a spear, telling him that people like him are a danger to society because he didn't even know he could control his power and simply gambled recklessly. He says he can't accept him as a lackey and pretends to stab him, but only strikes the ground near his head. He tells Shiki he won't take him as an underling but as a student, which confuses Shiki because he thinks the two roles are the same. Nato tells him he barely passed the test, but he will give him a chance to prove his abilities. Shiki still doesn't understand what is happening, so Nato starts from the basics and explains that they are on an island called Hell's Doorstep, formerly known as Onigashima, once the place where the original Mamotero slaughtered demons but now a safe haven for Oni. At the island's center is the Rosetsu Academy, a military school that trains Oni to fight the Mamotero Agency. Shiki panics upon learning he is on an island, but Nato pokes his face and says it doesn't matter. What matters is that Rosetsu Academy will teach him general education, control of his Oni blood, combat techniques, and the history between Mamo and Oni. Nato is Shiki's homeroom teacher and continues explaining how the academy operates, but it overwhelms Shiki's pea-sized brain. Shiki doesn't even care because all he wants is to know whether he can become strong enough to avenge his father. Nato can't promise anything but tells him that if he can't grow strong enough to fight the Mamotero Agency, he will be expelled. Soon, Shiki puts on his uniform and is excited to attend a different kind of school, but Nato warns him that others passed the test this year and he is likely the least skilled among them. Suddenly Shiki remembers his father and asks where his body is. Nato replies that they kept him in the morgue so Shiki could conduct the funeral according to his beliefs. Shiki becomes gloomy thinking about his father's death, and Nato tells him that being a sad idiot is a waste of time and he should focus solely on getting stronger to take his revenge. Shiki says Nato actually seems like a nice guy, which embarrasses Nato, who speeds away and warns Shiki that if he doesn't reach the classroom before him, he will be expelled. Shiki somehow catches up, and while wondering how to enter class in the coolest way to farm maximum aura, Nato simply kicks him through the door. Shiki feels like he now has an aura debt because of his uncool entrance and asks the masked boy named Jin for tissues for his nosebleed. Jin turns out to be even more of an edgelord than their teacher and tells Shiki to stop talking to him. Shiki gets annoyed and mocks him for not having his horns yet, so Jin manifests his horns immediately, saying that only dumb rookies who can't control them show them all the time. This offends another boy named Ikari, who also can't control his horns. Tension rises in the classroom as Shiki gets in Jin's face, but before things escalate, Nato suddenly appears behind them, and Shiki finds himself seated next to Jin without even realizing when it happened. Jin is equally shocked, but Nato doesn't care about their reactions and says that for their first lesson, they will be playing a game of tag. However, he is stunned when he sees the Titan shielding her, and even Jin begins to question whether Homer's blood has a will of its own. Without warning, the female Titan suddenly begins spewing blood violently, and while Jin ducks behind a rock for cover, Shiki ends up taking the entire blast head-on. The still crying Homer begs the female Titan to stop calling her elder sister, leaving Shiki completely confused about what she means. Homer once again pleads with him to escape, but Shiki refuses, insisting that she will bleed to death if he doesn't help her, and he cannot bear to watch another person die in front of him ever again. All at once, the female Titan unleashes a tremendous roar, its shockwave reaching even the other students outside the forest. Nato observes everything from atop a tree and decides to let Shiki and Jin try handling Homer's blood release ability before he intervenes. Back where the battle is unfolding, Shiki attempts to injure himself to draw blood and use it as a weapon, but nothing happens. The female Titan charges at him and he avoids the blow, but then she scoops up chunks of rock from the ground and hurls them at him. He is struck and sent flying, but the worst pain he feels is the realization of how pathetically weak he currently is. He has never lost a fight before, yet now he is nothing but a useless kid. Overwhelmed by frustration, he begins crying. At that moment, Jin emerges to join the fight and tells him to go home if he's going to cry like that. Shiki gets angry and insists he's only sweating from his eyes, but Jin doesn't bother responding. He rips open his wounds again, and this time forms two different kinds of chainsaws on each arm. The injuries he sustained from the female Titan's earlier strike still bother him, but he remains determined to win every battle placed before him. From afar, Nato watches, impressed that Jin can manifest two weapon types simultaneously. He starts explaining that Oni blood can transform into any shape the user imagines, though it is often shaped by their trauma, preferences, and personal experiences. Meanwhile, Jin charges toward the female Titan, using the circular chainsaw to scale her body. He then attempts to mimic Levi Ackerman by aiming for the Titan's neck, but she sacrifices an arm to shield herself. As Jin continues fighting her, Shiki yells at his own hand to create anything. He wonders why he cannot form a weapon when Jin can. Suddenly, it hits him, Jin always produces cutting tools, and even Homer has a deeply personal bond with her female Titan. Shiki thinks about how he can create guns because he likes them more than an average American would. With that realization, he finally understands how to control his ability. On the other side of the battlefield, Jin is struggling as the female Titan abruptly unleashes another deafening roar, rupturing his eardrums. He loses balance and feels certain he is about to die. Even Nato prepares to intervene, but then Shiki declares that he will take over the fight. He aims a powerful grenade launcher at the female Titan, and Nato is impressed that he figured out how to manifest such a weapon. Shiki is excited to test his new ability, but the female Titan attacks him again. He dodges and fires a grenade, instantly blowing her apart, leaving both Jin and Nato stunned by his overwhelming power. The female Titan begins dissolving as her scattered fragments vanish, and Homer loses consciousness. Jin is still shocked by Shiki's destructive strength when blood suddenly starts falling from the sky. However, it turns out to be just the blood blasted into the air by Shiki's earlier attack, and soon it shifts back into normal rain. Jin realizes that Shiki's strike didn't just kill the female Titan, it literally changed the weather. Shiki, meanwhile, doesn't even think about that. He heads toward Homer to check if she is okay, but his vision quickly blurs and he collapses, unable to move. Nato arrives and tells him that he expelled an absurd amount of blood just now, which is why his body no longer has strength. Shiki insists that he can still continue and forces himself upright, but barely 5 seconds later, he collapses again. Nato calls him a noob who can't even control his own power, though he privately recognizes that Shiki's ability is beyond anything he has ever witnessed. He warns Shiki that using too much blood could kill him, which makes Shiki worry about Homer instead of himself. He begs Nato to check on her first because she may have expended an enormous amount of blood, and he doesn't mind being treated afterward. Nato did not expect Shiki to be concerned about someone else while he himself is in such critical condition. But just as he is about to help them, Jin suddenly launches a surprise attack on him. Fortunately, Nato's reflexes are fast enough for him to block the strike, and he shoves Jin back. Jin coldly states that they don't need to worry about the losers. Nato asks what will happen if Homer dies because she cannot receive emergency treatment, and Jin replies that it has nothing to do with him. Disgusted, Nato tells him he despises selfish bastards like that. Jin couldn't care less and simply demands confirmation that he can graduate if he kills Nato. Nato assures him that he's telling the truth, and that's all Jin needs to charge straight at him. Nato blocks the blood chainsaw with his umbrella, which is made from the same material as the Hulk's pants, meaning it's completely indestructible. He presses a button that releases a smokescreen, and Jin assumes Nato plans to strike from the shadows. He believes he can kill Nato the instant he steps into range, but a split second later he is struck by several swift bullets. He immediately ducks behind a tree for cover, while Nato keeps firing rubber rounds from his multi-purpose umbrella, telling him that the shots won't kill him, but they will hurt like hell. He even deliberately targeted Jin's injured hand earlier to inflict maximum pain. Jin then realizes that Nato intends to maintain a safe distance because he believes Jin can only use close-range weapons. However, he has a few hidden techniques prepared specifically for situations like this, and he instantly moves out from behind the tree cover, weaving through Nato's bullets before launching several flying blades in his direction. Nato avoids them with ease, but he is genuinely surprised that Jin actually has a countermeasure for opponents capable of fighting outside his reach. Jin keeps pressing forward with his assault and then appears behind Nato and midair, convinced that Nato won't be able to defend himself this time. But Nato simply throws a bomb at him, sending Jin into a panic only for it to turn out to be yet another harmless smoke bomb. Jin assumes Nato plans to shoot him again from long range, which is why he never expects Nato to sneak up behind him and strike with a spine-shattering punch. Nato scolds him for being overly confident in his predictions during battle because that kind of thinking leaves him exposed to surprise attacks. Jin is now too injured and exhausted to even move, though he keeps trying anyway, forcing Nato to flip his umbrella upside down and use it as a cage to restrain him. As Jin continues struggling to break free, Nato asks whether he's that desperate to see his father. Jin suddenly freezes and asks how Nato even knows about that. Nato answers that he looked through his file and learned a few things about him, including the fact that his father is a mama. Hearing this makes every fiber of Jin's body revolt, while Shiki is stunned to discover that the two of them share similar backgrounds. But Jin is consumed by hatred as he admits that his father is a Mamotero, a monster who stole everything from him. He murdered his family and then experimented on him, leaving scars all across his body. Jin recalls how he survived on scraps and lived only on hatred for his father. He vows he will kill him with his own hands, even if it costs him his life. Fueled by rage, Jin suddenly bursts with energy and manages to rip the umbrella cage out of the ground. But before he can act, Nato grabs his face and smashes him into the dirt, calling him a foolish brat. He tells Jin that dying in pursuit of his dream would make him an idiot who would never accomplish anything. He commands him to live so he can actually achieve the dream, even if it means swallowing defeat and humiliation. Jin finally stops resisting upon hearing that, and Nato contacts the school to send the nurse because he has a severely injured student. He reports that Homer has been pulled from the test due to blood loss and that Jin has been restrained as well. Shiki, however, is still standing, so Nato informs him he has barely 6 minutes left before the time limit expires. Holding one of the balls, Nato tells Shiki he can either try to snatch it from him or attempt to locate the remaining ball and reach the school within 5 minutes. Shiki complains that it's unfair, but he has no choice except to play by Nato's rules. Nato runs off immediately, and Shiki decides to chase after him to watch his next move. Meanwhile, Jin sits silently tied to a tree when Shiki suddenly emerges from the bushes. Shiki approaches him and says he'll free him, but only if Jin agrees to team up. Jin is stunned by the proposal, and Shiki explains that neither of them can beat Nato alone, but together they stand a chance. Jin refuses, saying being rescued by an idiot would damage his pride, and Shiki doesn't even bother disputing the idiot remark. He instead asks if Jin's pride matters more than his goals, because he'll never reach them just sitting here. Jin demands to know why Shiki even cares, and Shiki reveals that his own father was a Mamotero as well. Jin is shocked, and Shiki goes full Naruto on him, declaring that they're the same. Meanwhile, Nato searches for Shiki and suspects he may have already returned since he can't find him. Right then, he spots Shiki sprinting away while cursing Jin and immediately moves to corner him. Shiki skids to a stop as Nato appears, reminding him that time is running out while flaunting the ball. Shiki internally curses Jin not for refusing to help, but because even after being rescued, Jin insisted on being the one in charge. Suddenly, Jin leaps down at Nato from above, aiming for the ball, but Nato dodges easily. However, this was merely a decoy, and Jin's true attack is a stone tied to a rope that he hurls at Nato. The rope wraps around Nato, binding him long enough for Shiki to seize the other end. Both Shiki and Jin begin pulling with all their strength, though Nato digs his heels firmly into the earth, confident they lack the stamina to overpower him. Then Jin fires a blood blade at Nato, forcing him to dodge and lose his balance in the process. That instant is all Shiki needs. He rushes forward and smacks the ball out of Nato's hand. It lands near Jin, and Nato assumes that if Jin tries to take the ball toward the school, Shiki will attempt to steal it from him. He expects the two to fight so he can reclaim it, yet to his shock, Shiki tells Jin to take the ball and run. Jin obeys immediately, and Shiki cheers for him excitedly, bragging that they managed to take the ball. But Nato reminds him that only the person who delivers the ball to the school passes, and at this rate, that will only be Jin. Shiki is dumbfounded upon realizing this, and Nato concludes that he is a total idiot who never thinks about consequences before acting. Shiki instantly regrets everything and screams for Jin to come back, but it's too late. Jin is already far out of hearing range. Jin believes he can reach the school in time, but then remembers that none of this would have happened without Shiki's help. Suddenly, he cannot bring himself to abandon him. He turns back and runs toward Shiki, who is baffled and asks if he's as directionally hopeless as Zoro. Jin tells him to shut up, saying the only reason he came back is because he refuses to owe his success to an idiot. He would rather fail and reach his goals on his own. That's why he insists Shiki should be the one to take the ball and head to the academy. But just as they're about to exchange it, a small pink creature sprints between them at high speed and stops right in their path. Nato instantly halts the test, telling them they must not fight when Muku, their high-speed courier pet, is present. He knows that Muku was deployed only in emergency situations. He activates the radio on its back and receives a distress call from the Kyoto branch, which is under attack by the Mamo Agency. Outside the test zone, the remaining students are patiently waiting for their turn, assuming Shiki and the others already failed since the time limit has passed. But Nato returns with Shiki and Jin at that moment, informing everyone that the Kyoto branch is in grave danger and is requesting immediate support. Instead of continuing the test, they will head there at once. They quickly board a boat and set out toward the Kyoto branch, and the students hold mixed feelings about being thrown into a real battlefield so suddenly. However, Nato informs them that they will not be participating in direct combat, and that he only requires their support for the actual fighters. Before long, they arrive in Kyoto, where Nato guides them to the area surrounding a well-known temple, explaining that the Oni Agency's base is situated directly beneath it. He brings the students into a seemingly ordinary restaurant, where a creepy elderly woman greets them. After they enter the living room, the old woman unveils a hidden staircase leading underground, which will take them to their destination. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Subakiri, one of the Mamotero Agency's captains, has just finished wiping out a squad of Oni. He calls them nothing but maggots pretending to be soldiers. His vice-captain, Yumobi, remarks that he has gone too far once again. She complains about all the destruction he caused, saying it will be troublesome to clean up. Subakiri responds that he simply gets irritated whenever he sees maggots. He adds that he wishes they had run into a female Oni instead, because they are tougher and can endure more pain than males, making them far better subjects for his experiments. Umogi tells him that his experiments are disgusting and that she despises them, especially the creature approaching them. Subakiri tells her not to be so cold toward his favorite creation, a hybrid of a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant. He has named the creature ugly, and that is the one thing Umogi actually agrees with him on. Subakiri explains that Ugly is both an important research specimen and a loyal member of their anti-Oni biological weapons program. Umogi reminds him that their job is to eliminate dangerous Oni and protect civilians, and she insists he should focus more on that instead of wasting time on creepy research. Subakiri argues that Oni blood is an incredibly fascinating substance, and he is doing everything he can to contribute in his own way. He claims that if they can discover how to control Oni blood themselves, it will greatly benefit the Mamotero Agency. And even more than that, if they manage to turn the regenerative properties of Oni blood into a medicine, they could become wealthier than Alan, Jeff, and Zuck combined. Umogi points out that even the Mamoteros possess similar abilities, but Subakiri says it is unwise to experiment on human beings. To him, Oni are just maggots, and he insists that experimenting on them is better than wasting them by simply killing them. A terrified young Oni overhears everything while hiding behind a corner, doing his best to stay silent. As soon as he hears the footsteps of the two Mamotero agents moving away, he breathes a quiet sigh of relief only for that sound to cost him his life, because Tsuburai hears it and immediately approaches. The child panics, and Subakiri decides to bring him to the lab. Umogi says she will knock him out so he won't cause trouble. But while she tries to put him to sleep without anesthesia, a drop of his blood splashes onto Subakiri's jacket. Umogi immediately realizes this spells trouble not for her, but for the boy. Tsubairi steps up to the child and starts kicking him, saying that even though he finds Oni blood intriguing, it is still filthy, and he refuses to tolerate it on his uniform. He then asks the boy whether his parents live nearby and whether they were part of the group he had just slaughtered. When he receives no reply, he lifts several Oni corpses to show to the child, asking if his parents are among them. The boy is too terrified to speak, so Subakiri decides to crush him under the bodies. Umogi finds this horrifying, because out of all the Mamotero abilities she has seen, Subakiri's is the most sinister. The black mist that comes from their bodies is actually a specialized bacteria that exists in their blood, which they can manipulate to form weapons. Tsubairi, however, can use the bacteria to control corpses, and she still hasn't grown used to it. Soon, Subakiri finishes killing the boy and instructs Ugly to eat the huge Oni dumpling while they move on to find more maggots to kill. Meanwhile, Shin and the other students are walking through a wide underground tunnel. Nato explains that certain shops in this area have access to this tunnel, which leads directly to their base. Eventually, they arrive at the gate that brings them into the space beneath the Yaruta temple, designed like a traditional Japanese home. The students are stunned as Nato tells them that this is the Kyoto Division headquarters of the Oni Agency. Just then, a doctor walks out of a room complaining about how much work he still has to do. But his attitude immediately shifts when he notices Nato. He greets him cheerfully and quickly fixes his hair when he spots the blonde beauty. She rejects him right away, but that doesn't break the doctor's spirit, since he's used to rejection. Shin asks who this clown is, and Nato introduces him as Kyoa, commander of the support unit at the Kyoto base. Kyoa adds that he and Nato were academy classmates, but Nato doesn't have time for idle chatter. He prepares to head straight to the front lines, and Shin asks to accompany him. The other students also want to join him rather than stay with a weirdo like Kyoa, but Nato doesn't pay attention to their complaints. He tells Kyoa to use these brats however he wants before leaving. Right then, a nurse calls Kyoa back inside to resume his duties. She notices the academy students as well and orders them to change immediately, because they desperately need more hands. The students quickly dress as assistant nurses and then enter the makeshift hospital, where dozens of injured Oni scream in agony. One of them has just been brought in, and he has lost both legs along with several other critical injuries. Shiki is horrified by his condition, and the nurse says he has no more than 3 minutes left at this rate. Kyoa just gives him a cheerful smile and says they will not let him die, but Shiki snaps at him, telling him not to make such careless and empty promises. Kyoa appreciates the boy's honesty and compassion, but he tells him that he is kind of a big deal around here and then decides to show the students how real support work is done. Elsewhere, Sububakiri and Yumogi have just finished handling the captain and vice-captain of another group. The surviving Oni are now terrified of them, and Sububakiri feels let down that he has to deal with another group of nobodies when he had been expecting someone strong. But his wish is granted almost instantly when Nato shows up and immediately activates his ability. Subiri is delighted to see him, but Nato does not allow him to enjoy the moment, unleashing his deadly move on him right away. The Oni are relieved to see that Nato has arrived to save them. However, Subiri is completely unharmed by the previous attack because he used the corpses of the Oni captain and vice-captain as shields. It turns out he already knows Nato, and he talks to him as if they are longtime friends. He asks why Nato is in Kyoto, since this territory does not belong to him. Subiri then mentions that he heard about a place where the Oni and Kyoto forces are gathering, and he believes that if he wipes out that location, the entire situation will be resolved. Nato maintains a perfectly neutral expression as he claims he knows nothing about it, and Subakiri replies that he will drop the matter if even Nato says the place doesn't exist. He then says he will just go sightseeing around the big temple instead, which makes Nato panic internally because he knows Subiri has extremely sharp instincts. He decides he must stop him here and prepares to fight seriously. Back at headquarters, Kyoa inserts several blood tubes into his body, and Shiki asks why they aren't giving that blood to the wounded instead. The nurse tells him to be quiet and pay attention as Kyoa approaches the most critically injured patient. Kyoa asks whether the man wants his hands or his feet regenerated, since he cannot afford to restore both at the moment. The injured man musters every ounce of strength he has left to say he wants his arms back so he can hold his children again. Kyoa promises he will be able to do that, but warns that the procedure will be extremely painful. He then slits his own wrist and lets his blood pour into the man's mouth, explaining that it increases a regular Oni's healing capacity many times over. As soon as his blood begins to take effect, the man screams in agony, and the nurse orders the students to hold him down. Shiki and the others follow her instructions immediately, while she tells the rest to bring more blood from the next room. Soon afterward, something begins pushing beneath the bandages on the man's arms, and Shiki is disturbed when he sees shapes resembling human fingers. The other students return, and suddenly the injured man fully regenerates his arms, and even the severe burn wounds on his chest heal completely. Shiki rushes to Kyoa and asks if they can also restore the man's legs. Kyoa says they can, but they must do it slowly and using small doses of his blood, since the patient has already consumed too much. If he drinks any more, his body might develop antibodies. Kyoa then approaches the man and tells him that he will be retiring from the combat unit, but he can join the support team and help others instead. He assures him that with prosthetics, he will be playing with his kids again soon, and the man is moved to tears. Kyoa then turns to the students and tells them that they might end up in this man's situation someday. He understands the desire for glory in aura farming that can only be achieved on the front lines, but he reminds them that soldiers can fight bravely only because someone is supporting them from behind and that someone is the support unit. Shiki and several others are genuinely impressed by him now, and they say they are ready to assist him however they can. Kyoa tells Shiki he needs help with another task and brings him to a depressed girl named May, who was admitted yesterday after being attacked by the Mamotero Agency. Her parents are still missing, and Kyoa wants to use Shiki's compassion to comfort her. Shiki accepts the task and begins talking to the girl, who slowly starts to open up. He asks her about school, and she says she has never gone. As Shiki wonders whether she might be a troublemaker like him, the support team brings in bodies from the battlefield and among them are Mei's parents. She bursts into uncontrollable sobs when she sees them, and Kyoa says that no matter how long he does this job, he never gets used to scenes like this. However, something far more sinister is hidden behind the corpses than anyone realizes. Subiri informs Nato that he infected some of the Oni corpses with his bacteria, knowing full well that the support unit would bring them back to the base for a proper funeral, allowing him to control the corpses remotely and destroy the headquarters from afar. Nato is horrified to hear this, and Subakiri decides to test whether his plan worked. He awakens the corpse of Mei's father while Shiki and Kyoa are distracted, and Mei becomes overjoyed, believing he is still alive. But under Tsubari's control, the corpse immediately begins strangling her. Shiki and Kyoa notice right away. Kyoa recognizes this as Subakiri's ability and tells Shiki to cover Mei's eyes immediately. Shiki obeys, and Kyowa drives two sharp knives into the corpse's brain, immobilizing it. When Shiki lets Mei see again, she starts crying all over once she realizes what happened to her father. Then Kyowa realizes there must be more puppet corpses inside the base. But he realizes this too late because the zombie puppets have already begun to move. Mei's mother suddenly rises and attacks Shiki before he even understands what's happening. She starts strangling him, and Kyowa tries to intervene, but before he can draw his scalpels, more zombies ambush him from behind and restrain him. Shiki is helpless, and with his oxygen supply cut off, he eventually loses consciousness. The same thing occurs throughout the entire headquarters, as the zombies attack the support staff who are carrying them. The supporters have no combat training, and because the attack is so sudden, they become easy prey for the zombies. At the same time, the corpses break into the ward where the severely injured patients are receiving treatment. They attack both patients and nurses, and no one knows how to stop the disaster. Back in the other room, Shiki barely manages to stay conscious as Mei begs her mother's corpse to let him go. Shiki tells her to move away because the creature isn't her mother anymore, but she refuses to listen. Kyowa tries to help him, but the zombies knock him to the ground. With no help coming, Shiki pulls out a Glock from his back. It turns out Nato gave him the gun on the boat, explaining that Shiki wasn't skilled enough to control his blood yet, so if he ever needed to fight, he should use a weapon he was already familiar with. Nato also explained that the gun contained Shiki's blood bullets instead of regular rounds, making them far more powerful. If there was ever a moment to use the gun, this is it. Shiki pulls Mei close so she won't see what comes next. Then he aims at the zombie woman's head and fires, ending her life. Shiki catches his breath afterward, while Kyowa is still pinned down by 3 zombies at once. Thankfully, Shiki recovers fast and shoots a hole through each zombie's head before helping Kyowa back to his feet. Kyoya complains that the support unit isn't prepared for situations like this, and he orders Shiki to handle cleaning up the mess while he evacuates the patients. In the main hall, the other students are still fighting the zombies with only their fists because they don't fully understand what's going on yet. They are unsure how to put the zombies down permanently since the creatures get back up no matter how badly they're injured. Right then, Shiki and Kyowa arrive. Shiki tells everyone to target the brain because that's the only way to stop the zombies. He immediately begins landing headshots in all directions, and Jin is the first to follow him. Jin slices open his own stitches and performs makeshift surgery on the zombies in front of him, and the others slowly catch on to what they need to do. Taking advantage of this moment, Kyowa orders the support staff to evacuate the patients and treat anyone who's been newly injured. Meanwhile, Shiki keeps firing at the zombies like his gun has infinite ammunition. But he feels that killing people who are already dead is the most disgusting thing he's ever done in his life. He begins to suffer first-hand trauma, thinking about how each zombie he shoots used to be a person with family and friends who cared about them. He feels like he's on the verge of tears and wonders why they are being forced to harm their own people when their real enemy is the Mamotero Agency. On the other side, Mato is still locked in a standoff with Tsuburai. He decides to take him down in close combat, but Tsuburai uses 3 dead Oni as a shield. Nato is irritated, but then he notices the monster Ugly beside him, ready to strike with a devastating blow. He somehow dodges at the last second, but Ugly smashes through the 3 Oni. Nato is far from pleased, and Sububakiri tells him he should be glad that the pests infesting this world are being wiped out. Nato replies that no matter how strong he is, he can't win every fight alone. Subakiri finds it ironic coming from another loner. His point is proven almost instantly when the fodder Oni offer to support Nato, but he tells them to escape to safety because they'll only slow him down. Sububakiri responds that no one is leaving, and he commands his assistant Momogi to handle her task. Mami Mamwa steps forward and uses her ability, generating an unbreakable barrier around Nato and the other Oni, trapping them where they stand. Sububakiri tells Nato that he can't leave the barrier unless Mimoy allows it. Meanwhile, he plans to take a walk around the Oni headquarters. Nato panics as Sububakiri reveals that he placed transmitters on all the Oni corpses, and they have all gathered beneath the Yaruta temple, meaning that must be the Oni HQ. Sububakiri begins walking toward the temple and orders Momogi to send Ugly into the barrier. She grants the creature permission to enter her barrier, and Nato braces himself to fight it. However, Subakiri explains that this creature is mass-produced, so sacrificing it is no issue. He snaps his fingers, and Ugly's stomach suddenly starts expanding. Nato realizes the creature is about to self-destruct and tells everyone to get down, but the tiny room doesn't give them enough space to escape an explosion powerful enough to shatter Momogi's barrier and damage nearby buildings. Mamo asks whether they should double-check to make sure Nato is dead, but Sububakiri says there's too much smoke and he doesn't want his uniform getting dirty. That ends up being a mistake because even though Nato is unconscious, he doesn't seem to have any major visible injuries. Back at headquarters, Shiki and the others finally manage to defeat all the zombies, and Kyowa has already transported the patients to safety. He believes their problems are solved now, but then he notices Mei staring blankly at her parents' corpses. He approaches to comfort her, and Shiki joins him. Shiki apologizes for shooting her mother, but she coldly replies that it's fine. Shiki is stunned by her reaction, but Mei continues, saying she spent her whole life running from place to place, hiding from threats she never understood. She had no friends, didn't even attend school, and always suspected something like this would eventually happen. She puts on a forced smile as she tells Shiki not to worry about her, and his heart breaks hearing this. He remembers his own childhood and how he always looked up to superheroes. In their folktales, Mamo is supposed to be the hero while the Oni are portrayed as villains. He asks whether this is truly how the heroes in those fairy tales behave. Suddenly, he hugs Mei, declaring that he will become a villain and crush every so-called hero. He promises her that he will create a world where she can smile again, and she has no idea how to respond. Shortly afterward, Kyowa brings Jin along for support as he explains his plan to cremate the bodies of the dead Oni. But Jin has no interest in his rambling. Meanwhile, the rest of the students are dragging the bodies to carry them to the funeral house. But the uptight nerd named Guji seems to have other intentions. Hikari tells him to stop slacking and help, but Guji says he has a theory. Since they were attacked here, he believes the headquarters aren't as secure as they thought and could be targeted again. Guji's ability is better suited for scouting, so he decides to stand watch. He immediately cuts his thumb and lets his blood drip onto the ground, generating a radar that can detect any living being within a 5-kilometer radius, and he can even identify if they're Mamo. Hikari is genuinely impressed with his ability when suddenly Guji detects several hostile individuals approaching their base. The signals come from Tsubakiri and Mimoi, who have arrived at the shop serving as the secret entrance to the Oni headquarters. The old woman there is already dead, and Momogi has found the tunnel entrance as well. While she examines it, Sabiri contacts the Mamotero Agency, instructing them to send multiple mass-produced uglies to his location along with a special-purpose ugly he created himself. He also requests information about a certain high-risk Oni whose name he can't remember, and then prepares to head inside. Momogi warns him that the area appears to be extremely large and that there could be many Oni lurking within, so they must proceed cautiously. She suggests throwing in some poison gas to make their job easier. But at that moment, Sabiri receives the file for the high-risk Oni, who turns out to be Shiki. He tells Momogi that they can't use poison anymore because he needs Shiki alive. She reacts with surprise, and Sububakiri explains that Shiki is exceptionally unique for an Oni, and he refuses to miss the opportunity to experiment on him. Meanwhile, Kyowa shows Jin the crematorium where they burn all their fallen comrades. Jin feels slightly stunned seeing it, and Kyowa remarks that once a war with the Mamo Agency starts, countless people end up dead. He warns Jin about the dangers of the path he's stepping into but reassures him that he doesn't need to worry too much since he can recover from nearly anything. After that, he suddenly becomes overly friendly and asks Jin whether he has a girlfriend. Jin completely ignores the weirdo and walks away. As Kyowa chases after him, he abruptly senses someone approaching from behind. He turns around just as Tsubakiri stabs him. Tsubakiri had been aiming for his back but missed slightly. Kyowa is too shocked to react, but Jin instinctively unleashes his blood chainsaws to fight the enemy. However, before he can act, Mimogi appears behind him, trapping his chainsaws inside her black prison and then cracking his arm. Jin screams in pain, but the black prison holding his arms doesn't last much longer. He tries to stay focused on the enemies despite the agony. Realizing they are in the worst possible situation, both he and Kyowa are injured, and he knows nothing about their opponents. Jin feels overwhelmed. Yet Kyowa remains oddly calm and tells Jin to run back and warn everyone about the attack while he holds off the two Mamos. Jin obeys, promising to return with reinforcements, and then Kyowa turns his attention to the two enemies before him. Subakiri orders Momogi to proceed, and she creates an enormous barrier around the entire headquarters. At this point, Kyowa realizes that her ability involves forming barriers using her bacteria and that she intends to ensure nobody escapes the headquarters alive. Kyowa starts calculating his options, recognizing that he cannot fight and doubting the student's strength to defeat such dangerous foes. He believes reinforcements won't be arriving anytime soon, which essentially means he is going to die. Suddenly, Tsubairi asks whether he knows Shiki, and Kyowa realizes things are far more complicated than he thought. He decides to resist with everything he has left and pulls a poison syringe from his coat. But before he gets a chance to use it, Subakiri slashes his neck, leaving a deep, gushing wound. Kyowa panics because he never even saw the strike coming, and he collapses as his blood sprays out with tremendous force. As he slowly loses consciousness, he wishes that if he must die, he wants Mami Momogi to be the one to finish him. But Tsubakiri has no intention of granting that wish, and he assumes Kyowa is already dead from the single attack. He prepares to control Kyowa's corpse with his bacteria, but he suddenly pauses when he senses the ugly creatures outside the barrier. He tells Momogi to let them in, and she grants the uglies permission to enter. Tsubairi asks them whether they brought what he requested, and one of the creatures vomits up a large box. He then orders the uglies to remove the cover, revealing an ornate wooden block. Tsubairi instructs them to carry the box carefully while they search for Shiki. Meanwhile, Jin reaches the headquarters to alert everyone. He is surprised when he doesn't find anyone nearby, but once he enters the main hall, he sees everyone gathered and prepared to fight. They are relieved to see him, but he is confused as to why they are all gathered in one place. Shiki explains that Guji used his ability and detected enemies approaching, so they moved quickly and evacuated all the patients. However, before the rest of them could escape, a black wall sealed off the exit, trapping them inside. Some people suggest they look for another way out, but the nurse says she has checked everything and found no escape routes. Shiki then asks Jin where Kyowa is, but before he can respond, an ugly appears. Everyone is startled by the grotesque creature, and they move aside as it walks past them toward a random person, who becomes the monster's food. Witnessing this, everyone panics and decides to flee to avoid fighting the creature, while Shiki chooses to keep Mei protected with him. Shortly afterward, Tsubairi and the others enter the hall and find it empty. He orders the uglies to set down the coffin and sits on it, telling Mamo to capture Shiki alive and kill the rest. She asks whether he's coming with her, but Subakiri refuses, saying he has important thoughts to consider. Meanwhile, the blonde troublemaker Kina searches through some clothes in a restroom, trying to find something easier to move in. At the same time, the melodramatic Ayo is in the room as well, crying that he's going to die because his heart rate is abnormal. Kina tells him to work on his fitness if he collapses just from a short run. She then covers his face so he won't see her changing. Ironically, she ends up switching into a skimpy gym outfit, and Rokero asks what she plans to do next. Kina replies that she is going to set up an ambush. Naturally, he becomes jealous of healthy people when he hears this because he's always terrified of getting sick. Just then, they hear the heavy footsteps of an ugly approaching. Rokero panics and tells Kina that he can't fight when he's this stressed. He begs her to handle it, which unexpectedly turns Kina on because she enjoys having full control. She tells Rokero to hide in the closet while she takes care of everything, and he nervously obeys. Kina then stands facing the door, waiting for the enemy to arrive. The ugly smashes through the wall and enters the room. But before fighting, it asks Kina whether she is Shiki. She angrily snaps that Shiki is the stupid-looking delinquent. Upon hearing this, the monster immediately attacks her. It knocks over the closet where Rokero is hiding, causing him to faint. Meanwhile, Kina decides it's time to show the creature who's in charge now that the room is sufficiently wrecked. She bites her thumb, and her blood transforms into boxing gloves around her fists. Elsewhere, Jin rushes back to check on Kyowa, and Akari prepares to fight a monster. At the same time, Shiki focuses on hiding to keep Mei safe, and the only spot he finds is the garden. Meanwhile, Rokero regains consciousness and finds the room completely silent. He starts thinking that maybe everything that happened was just a bad dream and decides to step out of the closet. But to his horror, the monster's face is staring directly at him. He panics as he tries to process what is happening, and things become even stranger when the monster suddenly gets up and obediently walks toward Kina. She gently strokes its face before positioning it properly and then knocks it out with a powerful punch. She climbs on top of the creature and begins unleashing an F-combo barrage on its head until it loses consciousness. Rokero is terrified of her at this point, but Kuina enjoys beating the monster senseless and then stomping on it while it lies helpless on the floor. This is because of her ability, called I Love, which turns any enemy covered in her blood into a submissive servant who loses the will to resist her. When Rokero finally climbs out of the closet to ask whether she really defeated the monster by herself, Kina smugly reminds him that she told him to leave everything to her. The reason she said this isn't because she's dependable or wants to look after everyone, but because she's a sociopath who likes making people so reliant on her that they become incapable of functioning